welcome into CBS Sports Network, where we've got a great hour planned for you talking college basketball and recruiting. I'm Adam Finkelstein. I'm here with Eric Bossi and Ebos. The story of the day, actually the story of the last 10 minutes, is that now it looks like Darryn Peterson will be back in the lineup for Kansas on Sunday as they take on Missouri. This is relatively breaking news. It just started to come out in the last 10 minutes. You were at Kansas's game against UConn, a home game on Tuesday night. And after the game, Bill Self had what I don't think was intended to be a doozy of a quote, but what I thought was a pretty strong one, saying, I think he said, it was kind of casually, he said, look, guys, he's 90 to 95%. But as I said before, as I've said all along, we're not going to play him until he's 100%. So really interesting stuff. He said that Kansas was going to have the day off on Wednesday. Then they were going to have 3 days of practice before the Missouri game. So coming into this show, listen, my thing is, how many guys playing college basketball are 95%? And a lot of them are playing. So let me start with this, Ebos. A, is this a bad look for Darryn Peterson to have his coach say he's 95%, but he's still not playing?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I don't think there's any magic meter out there that tells you whether you're 90% or 88% or 95%. I think this was just a matter of Bill Self trying to give a good indication of where Darryn was in the process and how close he was to playing. And I think what's been intriguing through all this, or maybe frustrating through all this, is it just seems like the messaging all along has been a little bit discombobulated with this. It's something that Bill Self was getting asked about over and over again, and he's never appeared entirely comfortable discussing this particular injury. And because of that, it's led to lots of speculation about and lots of questions about, is he really hurt? Why is he sitting out? Well, now hopefully Sunday when they play Mizzou in Kansas City, those questions will be done and Peterson's going to be on the floor.
And I think the other thing is, let's go back a few weeks now, Champions Classic in New York City. It was Matt Norlander at that point reported that the hope was that Darryn Peterson play at least one game in Las Vegas at Players Era. Players Era now, that's a week ago, more than a week ago. And he's still not back in the lineup. He obviously didn't play at UConn. So the timeline has continued to get pushed back. So he missed Players Era when the expectation initially was that he'd play one of those 3 games. He missed the UConn game, which was 4 or 5 days later. Now Missouri, which is a week and a half after Players Era, we expect him back. But prior to that, I had heard it may not happen before NC State. You talked about some of the speculation. Obviously, you hear a wide variety of things, of questions, of concerns when this happens. But from your perspective, because you've been doing this so long, you, like me, talk to a lot of NBA people. Do you think that NBA scouts were starting to ask questions? I want your take on it, and then I'm going to give you my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. They were starting to ask questions because I've been getting a ton of them. Darryn is a guy that, you and I have both known Darryn for a while. We dealt with him extensively as a recruit in last year's class where he was our number 1 ranked player. I live in Kansas City. Kansas is right in my backyard. So naturally, with how well I know Darryn and how well I know that program, I've been getting a lot of questions. And there hasn't really gotten to a status where it's super red flaggy just yet, but there have been a lot of questions just about, why has this been so awkward? Is he really hurt? What's going on? And me, knowing Darryn, I really think he has been hurt, and this has been a case of wanting to make sure he's 100%, because there's no sense in bringing him back and having him tweak something and then be lost to you for another 3 or 4 weeks or whatever. So I really think it's been a matter of making sure that they have him for the long haul while they fight their way through this, really tough early schedule that they've had.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing to me. You kind of alluded to it there. Can you play through? I mean, you can be hurt or you can be injured, right? And that's the old saying when we were growing up: are you hurt or are you injured? And I think most people are hurting a little bit through the course of the college season. So can you play through that? That's one question. The other question, though, is there a risk of furthering the injury? And if that is a factor, I think it's completely understandable. I think the silver lining for this, though, is you leave Champions Classic, you head to Vegas. They went 3-0 in Las Vegas. So I think Kansas has handled this way better than they could have possibly expected. I understand they lose that home game to UConn. That was disappointing, especially in the way at which it happened, getting dominated on the glass in the second half, in which UConn often went small in that game. So I think that was disappointing for them. But overall, what has this Kansas team learned? And the reason I ask is because you saw them. Well, I saw them live in Vegas. You've seen them firsthand on Tuesday against UConn. So between the two of us, we've seen their last 4 games. Where do you think they are now relative to when Peterson first left the lineup after just 2 games?
Obviously, they'd like to be doing better than 6-3 right now. The UConn game really slipped away from them late. I think that's one where they feel like a couple possessions could have turned that thing, and that's where a guy like Peterson is such a big difference maker. But if you look at things on a whole, they're still hanging in there at number 19 on KenPom. They've got a top 10 rated defense according to KenPom. And surprisingly, without Peterson, they've still got a top 60 offense. They've slowed things down. And even without the most efficient guard in Melvin Council running things, he's done a great job taking care of the ball. He's just not a particularly good shooter. But you've seen some things of what they can be with a true alpha scorer around them. Jamari McDowell, a guy who wasn't expected to play very much there, has stepped up and started the last 3 games. He's averaging 8 points a game. He's shooting 43% from 3. That's a big deal. Elmarko Jackson, a former McDonald's All-American who had really been struggling as a freshman, sat out last year, injury, got off to a slow start. He's had 17 points and 11 points in his last 2 games. Flory Badunga has really flourished as a first option. Trey White has been, as good as could be expected as a transfer. So you've seen some guys get a chance to really step up and get their roles more defined. And now when you bring back in a scorer like Peterson, I think the experience these guys have gained, the confidence they've gained is really going to make them a much better team than expected. And I think that they've unlocked some depth that they weren't expecting to have.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think that the depth was the big question coming into the season. We've seen different guys step up. I couldn't be happier for the Jamari McDowells and Elmarko Jacksons of the world. Seeing Jamari make threes, seeing Elmarko get downhill and attack the rim, that's exactly what we were expecting, hoping for out of high school. Going to be really interesting because right now it appears that we are going to get to see Darren Peterson this Sunday. That will be just his 3rd game of the season. Again, he finished last year as the number 1 ranked recruit in the national class of 2025. He's currently the number 1 ranked prospect atop the CBS Sports NBA Draft Big Board. Don't go anywhere. Ebos and I are coming right back after this break to talk a little bit of recruiting right here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network, where I'm here with Eric Bossi. We are talking college basketball and recruiting. Now, on the show, our last show, we broke down what the national class rankings, recruiting class rankings, look like after the early signing period. We are still waiting for what I expect will be one more, at least, press release of someone who signed during the early signing period, but just hasn't been made public yet. As we told you last week, we are kind of expecting that to be Caden Samuels to Alabama, but we'll see what happens. If you're looking for any of that content, you can find it over on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. Today, though, we are going to jump ahead and talk about the national class of 2027. You can see the top 10 right there. It begins with Marcus Spears and CJ Rosser. Now, Bossi, you just saw both of those guys live. For context, this is a class where Baba Oladotin and Bruce Branch were the top 2 prospects coming out of the summer. Both of them has since reclassified to the senior class of 2026. So in this 27 group, when you got to see those top 2 prospects, what were your impressions of them?
Yeah, not only did I get to see them, I got to see them and their teams go head to head on Friday night in Dallas. So it's what an ideal situation to see the now top 2 ranked guys with Marcus Spears Jr. and CJ Rosser go head to head. What stands out is that physically they are very similar. They're both in the 6'9", 6'10" range with a little bit over 7-foot long wingspans. They're both more on the lean side, long, fluid movers. But what really stands out is they play entirely different games. Spears right now is based on hustle and making lots of things happen with his activity level, whereas Rosser is more of a new age 4-man. He can face up, he can shoot the ball. He's a very, very fluid mover. Kind of gives you an idea of like a young Rashard Lewis type player. So he's more productive right now than Marcus is, where Marcus has more of those intangibles that you're kind of banking on long term, but neither of them is a perfect prospect. We're not looking at these guys the way we thought of a Cooper Flagg or an AJ DeBonsa or a Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer even in recent years. These are guys that, not all classes are created equal. And if we're going to be blunt about it right now, the class of 2027 is looking like a little bit of a down class. So your number one in 2027 isn't like a number one in some of the other recent classes.
All right, now let's get into that because I have talked very plainly, very candidly about the 2026, the current senior class is a down class. It is nowhere near as good as the current freshman class in college basketball. So what we're saying now is we've got potentially a downtrend that is going to be 2 years. Now, as everybody knows who follows 24/7 Sports or watches this show, you tend to watch the youngsters a lot more than I do. I don't want to put you on the spot here because I know these guys are real young, but how long do you think this downslope, if you will last? Is there a bounce back coming up on the horizon?
Yeah, I think looking ahead to 2028, I feel a little bit better about that class than I did either 2026 or 2027 at this point. We're talking at the beginning of their sophomore years in high school, and the very little I've seen of 2029, the high school freshmen, is pretty promising. But that's how it goes. Basketball talent, it's all cyclical. You had some big time up times in the mid 2000s and in the mid 2010s. Now we're just in a little bit of a down one, and it's the way it goes. I mean, you look at it when Baba Alla Dutton moved to the class of 2026 after being number one in 2027, we slotted him at number 10. When Bruce Branch moved to the class, we slotted him at number 8. So that gives you a little bit of a look into it being a weaker class.
Now, let's talk about those two guys a little bit because Bruce Branch, I thought going in at number 8, and we had a discussion about exactly where he goes. I think it's fair to say we were in the 5 to 9 category, like talked about him as high as 5, as low as 9. Ultimately, we settled on number 8. And for me, I think we found, as we often try and do, because everybody knows and I'm very passionate about this, don't want to yo-yo kids. We don't want to start them high and then drop them and then raise them again because we know how important these rankings can be to these kids, sometimes even too much so. But I think for Bruce in particular, we have him at a spot at number 8 where it is both acknowledging his recent progression and also accounting for the fact that he could still be in the midst of a major ascension. Now, you got a chance to see him live recently. What were your impressions of him?
Yeah, I got to watch him play twice last weekend in Dallas, and my impressions were a little bit mixed. Obviously, you see his size. He's 6'7". He's got long arms. He's got the build you want to see out of a wing. He looks like he was put on the planet to play basketball. Like he doesn't look like a football player or like he'd excel at another sport or anything like that. He's smooth. He didn't shoot the ball quite as well as I expected, and he looked like he was pressing a little bit at times. And I think what people forget in this is when we have him in the class of 2027, we're making a projection on him based on him having another 18 months of high school before he leaves for college. He's just shaved 12 months off of that. So there's going to be a year less of development time before he gets to college, and that has to be factored in. And that's why you see him come in ranks not quite as high. But he has a chance to move up. Certainly is on a loaded team, so there's a lot of mouths to be fed on that prolific prep roster. He's played alongside another top 5 guy, Caleb Holt. He's got a top 35 guy going to Kansas. They've got good young players. Rudy Anderson is a top 10 player in the class of 2027. So it's a loaded squad. So he's going to have to kind of find his way, and it's not reasonable to expect him to go out and get 25 or 30 every night, although he has that capability. But we're seeing what happens now. We're looking at you with a year less of development before you get to college, and it changes how you're evaluated.
What I love about Bruce Branch is the upside. Got a terrific basketball body, as you said, at about 6'7". He's got long arms. He has an atypical combination of early length and shooting. Typically, there's an inverse relationship between those two. But even though he didn't make shots in front of you this past weekend, the shooting all the way back to the 3 SSB season with Compton Magic has been something that's been impressive. So I'd like to see a little bit more creation from him, see if he can transition from a wing into a guard. We've seen that. We've seen some of that progression. I want to see a little bit more of it. I want to see how much he can pressure the rim. Those are things in my mind that could help him continue to ascend in this now national class of 2026. Bossi, before we go, you had a tweet yesterday about Beckham Black, who's the younger brother of Anthony Black, who of course plays for the Orlando Magic, saying he may be the top point guard in that class. Is there anyone else in this class of 2027 that you'd really want to put the spotlight on right now?
Yeah, at least that's not already like in the top 10 or already a 5-star guy. Another guy that I'm keeping an eye on, another point guard. Another guy with NBA ties is Reese Alston, the son of former NBA star and street ball legend Rafer Alston. I think he's a guy who's getting ready to totally explode onto the scene. Now, he is our fifth or sixth ranked point guard, so it's not like he's a guy who's been totally slept on now, but he's another guy who I think, along with Black, is ready to start putting some pressure on Rudy Anderson as the top ranked point guard in the class and someone that we could see make a push for the national top 10. He's big for the point guard position. He's a tremendously explosive athlete. He's starting to score the ball and he's starting to make other guys better. So it's exciting to see that the one place that we're starting to see some step up in this class is with the guys who have the ball in their hands the most and are, in a lot of cases, the most important player on their team.
And I think the other point to kind of wrap all this up is, at least in my opinion, I know there have been some early commitments in the national junior class, but there is less emphasis than ever before on juniors and certainly underclassmen, because everything is in a what can you do for me right now mode between NIL and the transfer portal. So college coaches right now, you even see during the season, they take a step back from high school recruiting altogether, at least relative to past years. So they're focused on figuring out who they want to and who they're capable of retaining from their current roster, who's available in the transfer portal, trying to project that just a few months out. Then it's senior class of high school, maybe some international, maybe some junior college as well. So these junior and below prospects in high school, there's less emphasis than ever before on those guys. So my message to them would just be, hey, be patient, run your own race, because the timelines are vastly different now than they used to be. But of course, we're going to have lots more on this over at 247.com, 247sports.com. Pardon me. Ebos, you are the OG in the space. We always appreciate you, my man. We will see you again next week. Don't go anywhere. Coming up next on the CBS Sports Network, we're going to have Isaac Trotter jump in and talk a little roster construction trends with me here. Stay tuned. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network, where I am here with Isaac Trotter. And as you know, if you've watched this show, Trotter and I like to nerd out on some basketball topics from time to time. And last week when I was in Las Vegas for the Players Era, and I'm watching different teams and I'm watching some very distinctive styles of play, I had a topic that I wanted to really flesh out with them. And it is the increased frequency with which we are seeing top national teams play with double big lineups. Remember, just a few years ago, everybody was playing 4 around 1. They wanted maximum spacing. They wanted three-point shooting. Well, now size is at a premium, and it appears to be paying off when you talk about the number of the top teams in the country who are playing very big in their front line, and sometimes doing so to the detriment of their own shooting. That led me to thinking, last year, we saw 3 of the 4 Final Four teams play that same style. The team that went on to win the national championship, Florida, a couple months earlier, Todd Golden was on this very show talking about the virtues of playing big. Check it out.
The philosophy of playing with 2 bigs. You are kind of have this reputation for being data-driven and analytical. I think to some people it seems counterintuitive that you would appear to be committed to 2 bigs. What is the philosophy behind playing with so much size, especially along the front line?
Yeah, well, it's something that we saw firsthand, in the West Coast Conference from Gonzaga for a number of years, and their ability to play big lineups, be very efficient from 2, raise their floor by being a very good rebounding team, and theoretically, when you're bigger, you should be a better defensive team. And so when we got here to Florida, we thought if we could thread the needle of playing similarly to how Gonzaga did, or how Tommy Lloyd played when he first got to Arizona, that it would really raise our floor and allow us to be a team that played in the tournament most years. And when things broke our way, allowed us to make deep runs.
All right, Trotter, why should I explain it when we've got the defending national championship coach to explain it himself? But I think people are following suit. If you look at the teams playing with 2 bigs, and to be clear, when I say 2 bigs, I mean 2 non-shooting bigs. You've got Purdue, number 1 in the country. Arizona, you heard Todd Golden talk about Tommy Lloyd right there, and Arizona's still doing it. Kobe Pete's not shooting any threes. You've got Houston, just as they did last year. You've got Gonzaga, again, 2 bigs. They shoot a little bit from the 4 spot, but not very much. And Florida still playing with those 2 bigs. We've talked about it on this show with Tommy Hawk playing the 3 for them. This is a definite trend in college basketball. So my question to you, let's start with this. Like, what is the impetus for this? Why are we seeing this with such frequency?
I do think it is a floor raising move, as Golden said, because you're just able to have this 2 point differential type of emerge. And that's one thing that I've noticed this year. Gonzaga, they've made 94 more twos than their opponents. 94. Like, that's an insane math advantage. That's number one in all of college basketball. Tennessee, they're trying out a very jumbo lineup. Nate Ament plays the 3. They'll play Cade Phillips at the 4, Felix Okpara at the 5. They basically have 5 bigs that they just rotate in at those 2 front court spots. Tennessee is plus 65 in the number of twos that they've made, more than their opponents. So when you can control the paint and you can rebound at a really high level and you get layups and you stop layups, that's a really, really good combination moving forward. And here's one other factor. The 2-point shot last year in college basketball was more efficient than the 3-point shot in college basketball. First time ever, according to Jordan Sperber, who's done terrific work throughout his career. He worked last year under Mississippi State coach Chris Jans. So I think it is kind of like teams are getting better at generating more twos. Those offensive rebounds have become a huge part of the strategy for different teams to try to win that shot volume game. And getting 2 bigs on the floor, to steal a football analogy, big people move little people. And that's really showing up in college basketball right now.
All right. Now, let me ask you this, because I do think that there is a lag, if you will, between the numbers and schematic choices that coaches make. I would argue that we've seen, and I'm sure there's numbers that could articulate this better than my eye test, but it was about maybe 7 or 8 years ago that the points per possession differential most favored 3-point shots. But schematically, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years ago, meaning like 3 years after that, where we saw more and more college teams playing to really value the 3-point shot. So again, there was a lag. I'm curious how long we are going to see size be put at such a premium, and if it's a trend that is only for the very top of college basketball, or if it starts to permeate down. But my question to you is, if you're going to play big, what are the requisites for being a national contender?
Well, your guard better be able to shoot. And that's one thing that, like, I think is an interesting angle, because, like, you can't just trot out 2 bigs and be like, yeah, we're automatically great. Because Indiana, point in case last year, Malik Renew, Umar Ballo, like, they trotted out 2 bigs. They said, hey, we're going to play inside out. We're going to dominate all of the things. And when your guards can't make threes at a high volume, you kind of run into problems. So I think, like, the floor raising comment from Golden makes a lot of sense when you have 2 bigs, but you don't get that elite ceiling if your guards can't really go. Like, and your guards just have to be able to go if you're going to be able to do that. And we saw that last year with Florida, right? Like the Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, Will Richard backcourt, Denzel Aberdeen, I'd throw him in there. They could really go. Auburn, same type of deal. That really raised it too. And you also have to execute defensively when you're playing 2 bigs like this. I think that's one underrated part of this. When I see 2 big lineups and you have great rim protection on the back end, if you can also blanket the top 3-point shooter on the other end, like defensively, that, like, there's ripple effects of having 2 bigs on the floor that you have to be able to weaponize. And it starts with your guards being excellent offensively and being able to give you some of that 3-point volume, because you can't just win games without shooting threes. Arizona is trying that at times this year. We'll see if they can get away with it long term. But also defensively, if you're able to weaponize your size and really blanket that 3-point stripe and kind of funnel teams into your big fellas inside, that's when those good teams turn into great teams.
I'll tell you this too. I think it puts, when you say the guards have to be able to go, I think the guards have to be shot makers, because the paint becomes jammed up. We are seeing this a little bit. We talked about this on the show a couple weeks ago. We're seeing this a little bit at Florida right now. Like Boogie Fland, he's trying to get to the rim, and there's not a whole lot of space when you have 2 bigs in there. So it is a really kind of, you're trying to thread a very fine needle if you are trying to create space for guards to make plays and get paint touches when you are playing 2 bigs. There's still ways to do it. You can be creative offensively, but it is hard. And it's one of the reasons why I think Purdue ranks so high offensively, because they have those 2 bigs. They don't space the floor at either one of those positions, but they have such good shot makers at the 1, the 2, and the 3 that they can create enough space around their 2 bigs. So it's a little bit of a secret sauce. All right, let's talk about the flip side of this coin, is that the amount of teams playing small or with 4 real perimeter players is much less than I've seen in quite a long time. This was glaring to me in Vegas when I watched Alabama play Gonzaga, because just physically, those teams looked so different. Alabama was notably smaller, and it was the kind of thing that you could see like in layup lines. You're like, wow, this is a vastly different scenario. And it puts so much pressure on those teams to make shots. And when I go through like the top, let's call it 15, I really only see like 3 teams that are really still buying into that, hey, we are going to space the floor and have 4 guys who can shoot at all times. And that's UConn, BYU, and Alabama. They're the first 3 that come to mind. So again, I'm going to ask you the same question. If you're going to play that style where you're going to have floor spacing is going to be the priority, in your opinion, what are the requisites to being a national championship contender with that type of lineup?
Paint touch guard. That feels like maybe the biggest archetype, because if we're going to play 4 shooters on the floor at the same time and we're going to be able to create those driving lanes, we're going to be able to take shot blockers away from the rim in certain scenarios, you just have to have guards that can break them down and get to the paint and finish through contact. And I think we've seen, the really rich teams in college basketball, I think this year are doing a better job of like weaponizing and streamlining their offenses. Like I think right now teams use non-shooters as well as they have in years. Like John Shire did a really good job with that last year with Kaman Malawach, like using him in the slot. I think Kentucky last year did it really well with Amari Williams, using him as a top of the key dribble handoff hub. And then when you're able to have 4 out and have that spacing and invert the floor a little bit, now we're having teams like post up their guards and you're able to throw lobs over the top and you're able to find mismatches that way. And it's just creative ways to use non-shooters to generate space. So I think when you have a 4 out 1 in team like a UConn, like what BYU has, and that's why I think like what BYU did in the free agency market, let's just call it what it is, was so huge. Like they had to get a paint touch guard. The number 1 paint touch guard in the portal was Rob Wright. And I think that's part of the reason why BYU, I have them in my tier 1 of national title contenders, because their offense is just so hard to guard, even though they're playing 4 out 1 in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to be clear, I'm still a proponent of 4 out 1 in systems. I think it is a better aesthetic product. If I'm just from a fan's perspective, I would rather watch a 4 out 1 in team play. The thing, I'm going to answer my own question, and that was, what is the requisite if you want to be a national championship contender, if you were still playing 4 around 1 and prioritizing 3-point shooting and floor spacing? And the old school coach in me has got a throwback answer. It's just good old fashioned toughness. Like you go back to that Alabama Gonzaga game. The difference in that game was Gonzaga pounded Alabama on the glass. Nate Oates talked about it in the postgame, like, hey, if we're going to play small and we're going to get multiple shooters on the floor together, 3 guards together, those guards have to go in there and dig us out some rebounds. You look at that UConn win over Kansas, where they're giving up so much size. They played small ball, not even 4 around 1, but they played 5 out for a time. They put Caravan at the 5. And what did they do? They out-rebounded Kansas in the second half. So it was good old-fashioned toughness. If you were going to prioritize perimeter floor spacing and shot making, I think you need guys who can do it with some toughness. You might sacrifice some size, maybe even some length and athleticism, but like, the Cam Spencer type, like I'm just going to wrestle this ball away from you. Obviously, the sweet spot here is the teams that can do both, right? They can give you size and shooting at that 4 spot. And real quickly, Trotter, we're going to talk about both of these coming up in the next segment. But the 2 teams that do that the best for me are Michigan with Cam Boozer. Duke with Cam Boozer, and Michigan with Yaxel Lundeborg. But to me, if you can do that, if you can get a 4-man who has size and floor spacing, you're in a great spot. What's your take real quick?
I think 4 men that can do all of those things can be the most valuable archetype in college basketball because of their ability to make you play multiple different styles. They're also going to be the most well-paid dudes as well. So I think that's why Yaxel Lundeborg was number 1 in the portal for us. And that's why Cameron Boozer is one of the elite recruits in the class of 2025.
All right, we're going to talk much more about Yaxel Lundeborg, Cameron Boozer, and a few others coming up next as we break down the race for the National Player of the Year in college basketball. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network. I'm here with Isaac Trotter. And Trotter, we're here to settle a debate because everybody this week wants to talk about the National Player of the Year. It's only the first week in December. Cam Boozer's running away with it, but let's face it, we have a lot of basketball left to go, the better part of 4 months still But we're going to give our first crack at it, and we will continue to update this list as we go. I don't want to spend too much time on Cam Boozer because it feels like John Rothstein's talked about it. Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander have talked about it, and you should certainly check those out if you haven't already. But Trotter, give me the smart man's version of why Cameron Boozer is right now the clear leader for National Player of the Year.
Analytically, he's having one of the best starts to the season that we've ever seen from any player, period. I'll give you my favorite stat with Cam Boozer. Duke has a plus 46.5 net rating when he is on the floor. That is the best mark in the country, bar none. 100th percentile, according to CBB analytics. Duke is a really, really good basketball team when Cameron Boozer's on the floor because he does a lot of things really, really well. End of analysis.
All right, fair enough. And as I said, a lot of people have really taken deep dives into that this week, so we are not going to belabor the point. What I would like to do is talk about who has the best chance to overthrow him in the next 3 or 4 months. I'm one of those people that believes that if you are the best player on a national championship team, that you should have a case to be the best player in the country. Braden Smith has a very good chance to be the best player on the best team in the country. Right now, Purdue is #1 overall in the polls. Braden Smith was an analytics darling of his own last year. Trotter, we just talked a lot about Purdue's style of play, the two bigs, the amount of three-point shooting they have. But what Smith provides is the most reliable point guard in all of college basketball. He's an absolute maestro who understands not only how to feed his bigs, but also the nuances of an advanced pick and roll game, the nuances of hitting his shooters coming off-ball screening action. So I think he's perfect for this Purdue system. And while I don't consider him the same long-term prospect as someone like Cameron Boozer, I do think he has a very real case as the best player in college basketball. But I'm curious, what say you?
He would actually be my vote for National Player of the Year right now. I think that he has been terrific offensively, even if the scoring numbers haven't necessarily shown it yet. He is 5th among all high major players, creating 38.5 points per game. That's just a nut stat to me. And the best part about this stat is it's your own points. It's the assists, like the points you get off the assists. And it's the points that you get off of the passes that lead to shooting fouls. And he is just terrific at creating offense. And get this, Purdue is on pace to potentially break the record for the best and most high-powered offense of the internet era. That is very well in the cards potentially this year. Braden Smith is literally the one, like the straw that stirs the drink for all of that. So for me, he is the National Player of the Year right now. He was my preseason pick. Even though Cameron Boozer has been great, I have to play a little devil's advocate, and I can't just sit aside while Braden Smith gets tossed off to the edge, even though he's been terrific this year for the best offense in America.
Say that one more time about the tempo.
But they're basically on pace for the best offense in the internet era right now. Okay. Their adjusted offensive rating.
Got it. All right. Fascinating. One of the conversations that I heard this week about this National Player of the Year race is, okay, Boozer's the runaway favorite. It's pretty well everybody seems near consensus that Braden Smith is the next best alternative. The dialogue is, would you take those two or would you take the field? So my question to you now is, beyond those two, who else other than Braden Smith can really contend for this National Player of the Year award in the coming months, even if they haven't necessarily done so in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season?
Well, there's plenty. I think Darren Peterson could certainly play his way back in this conversation, but let's start with JT Toppin at Texas Tech.
Okay.
One part about JT, he and Christian Anderson, they've been the 4th best, pick and roll combination this year. They're scoring at an absurd rate, those two guys together. And Toppin's offense has been outstanding as a play finisher, but he's added more to his game as a distributor this year. I think his assist rate could spike even to double of what it was last year. This year, he's already had 6 games with multiple assists. Last year, he only had 9 of those. So we got 4 more months of basketball games that JT Toppin is going to play. He's going to obliterate all of his assist totals from a season ago. And so then when you add the playmaking that he's had, when you add the continued strides as a shooter, even though it hasn't shown yet from the 3-point stripe, and his interior dominance and the Christian Anderson unguardableness between them two, that's a really, really great combination.
I just can't. I listen, everything you just said is 100% accurate. The coach in me struggles with the big guy, the left-handed big guy who can't turn his left shoulder. if I'm game planning against JT Toppin, like I just look at it as like there is a definitive scouting report for how you guard JT Toppin. It shouldn't necessarily dictate how we vote, but when I watch games, that is glaring to me. We talked a little bit about Yaxel Lundeborg in the last session. I think the experience, if you will, at Michigan has been vastly different over the last 2 weeks than it was from the first 2 weeks. Michigan in those first couple of weeks did not look great to me. I thought they escaped against Wake Forest. I think it was TCU. They got away with another one. Like both of those games, I thought they very easily could have lost. But when I tell you they dominated the Players era, like I went to that game against Auburn, and at halftime, it was over. I don't mean like, hey, it was 20 and they ended up winning by 20, even though Auburn cut it to, 8 at one point. And no. It was over. Like everybody knew it was over. The second half, people were just going through the motions because Michigan was that dominant. Yaxel Lundeborg is 23 years old. He's powerful. He's athletic. He's long. He's a big time passer. He stuffs the stat sheet in almost unmatched ways. But he's 23 years old. Now, that has more to do with his NBA upside than it does with how good he is at college basketball. But what I want to ask you about, connecting to our last conversation about styles of play, the way that Michigan has used him, it seemed to me that they got away from putting him at the 3 and put him back at the 4, where he can create more mismatch problems, didn't necessarily play through the high post with their 5-man quite as much. But what have you seen in terms of the way they are utilizing Yaxel with the Wolverines?
I talked to Dusty May about this, and they basically view him as a big guard. Like, he just really is a big guard. And I think the biggest notable thing is they haven't actually gone away from using the 3 bigs together. Yaxel Lundeborg at the 3, Mrez Johnson at the 4, Damar at the 5. They've just been using it more sparingly. They've used it more sparingly, like 11 or 12 minutes against Gonzaga, and they were plus 12 in those minutes with those big 3 on the floor together. Like, it was really effective for them in that matchup. I think moving forward in certain matchups, it will be terrific. But the most important thing about Yax this year, they've revamped his shot diet tremendously. Like we'd expect from every Dusty May transfer so far. Like, we have a big sample size. Every transfer who plays for Dusty May takes way more threes than they did a year before. And Yak shot 1.9 threes per game last year at UAB. This year it's at 4.7, and he's shooting at a really, really high clip. And then part of that is he's just eliminating mid-range jumpers. Last year he took 54 mid-range jumpers at UAB. This year, 2. That's the game plan. Like, they have completely streamlined his shot diet, and it's leading to some of the best efficiency numbers of his career.
Yeah, I'm with it. As I said, I thought Yaxel, especially in Vegas, getting to see him in person, it was vastly different than at least the tape was from those first couple of weeks of the season. I think the other thing we're seeing too is that he's such a good passer. And we saw it last year that he can create for others, but he can also be a connector, which I think when we start talking about how his game's going to translate to the NBA, that's going to be an increasingly important thing, because at 23 years old, NBA teams aren't going to be asking like, hey, what's your upside? They're going to be saying like, hey, what's your ability to come in and impact winning right now? Because this is more of a short-term investment than if you're talking about somebody who's going to come into the NBA at 19 years old. So Yaxel, again, 2 very different conversations, where he ranks in the player of the year discussion versus his future in the NBA, but he has been dominant, and Michigan has been as good as anyone in college basketball. All right, as we round out this discussion, you look at the betting markets, and A.J. Dybantsa is a pretty consistent name in these top 5, sometimes even as high as number 3 in the National Player of the Year projections, or what's the word I'm looking for? Not projections, but odds.
Awards watch list, yeah.
Yeah. What's your take on AJ and whether or not he's a real candidate to be National Player of the Year?
Man, I think he's absolutely a legit candidate, because this offense, like I kind of was hinting at earlier, there is no signs of this slowing down at all. Like, I feel like Kevin Young has really found a nice little groove with what this offense is. And it's really just a feed the studs type of mindset. It's AJ Dybantsa shots. It's Rob Wright pick and rolls. It's Richie Saunders off the move threes. And that's about it. Like, their lineup, their offense is basically just fully centered around those 3 dudes. So I think his counting stats are going to be really, really terrific. And we know those matter in a National Player of the Year race. Here's the other thing, though, that I like. His mindset this year has been downhill, downhill, downhill. Half of his shots are at the rim. I love that. For a big, strong guy like that, he's drawing over 6 fouls per 40 minutes. That type of downhill, aggressive, attack-first mindset really makes him a really tough guard. He's not bailing as many teams out with tough contested fadeaway jumpers or trying to prove that he can hit 8, 9 threes in a single game. Like, he wants to get to the rim. And I think that has certainly transformed like how dangerous BYU's offense could be, because they can beat you at the mid-range, they can beat you at the rim, they can beat you from 3, and they're a brutally tough cover these days.
You know what else he's doing? He's drawing fouls in different ways. Like when you watch high school and you look at those numbers, he drew fouls in high school and he drew fouls in FIBA, but he did it by like being theatrical. He was a free throw merchant, quite frankly. Like he'd go in, he'd initiate contact, and then he'd flail all over the place and really put pressure on the referee. The problem is when he didn't get the call, it was a turnover. He's not doing that anymore. He's going through contact. He's trying to finish plays at the rim. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that maturation in his game. I think it's paying off. And I think the other area, got to give Kevin Young credit, because he has been able to integrate AJ Debonta into his system in a way in which hasn't required AJ to change his game too much. He's free to dribble the ball quite a lot. He's surrounded by extreme shooting. He's got a lob threat over there. So AJ has been really, really tremendous. Trotter, you got 20 seconds. Give me your LeBaron Philon pitch.
The most efficient offensive engine that we have in sports right now in college basketball. Just a tremendous offensive weapon. He is, to go back to my favorite points created stat, he's averaging over 40 points created a night. That is one of the best marks in the sport.
I wrote about this at Vegas, though. He's got to get back to defending the way he did his freshman year. His focus right now seems to be almost exclusively on offense. If he can find the defense he had as a freshman, he's got a chance to be the best two-way guard in college basketball. We'll see if he can do that. Don't go anywhere. We've got one more segment coming up right here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network. I'm Adam Finkelstein. We hope you've enjoyed the last hour, but I have to address what has been the very popular question. No, this is not a new backdrop for me, but what you are going to see throughout the course of this winter on these Friday shows is me in various places. Right now, I'm in the Puma North American headquarters just outside of Boston, because as soon as this is over, I've got to go in and talk to the directors in the Pro 16 meetings. In a couple weeks, you're going to see a show from Fort Myers, Florida, in the city of Palms, because quite frankly, this is just what I do. I am lucky enough to get to travel around the country watching the very best high school basketball prospects and college basketball prospects and being able to bring it to you live. Today, those travels happen to take me to Florida. Next week might be home. Week after that, it'll be Florida. Week after that, it very well could be Phoenix, Arizona for Hoop Paul West, and the travels are going to continue. So, as I said, Puma North American headquarters, thank you to Hallie for keeping a watchful eye over these shows. And suffice it to say, I'm in the basketball room, and I can't show you what's over there because that stuff doesn't come out for another year. But thank you to Puma for their hospitality. Remember, we are going to continue to be on the road. We are on the road and watching prospects more than anyone else in the industry, which is why we are able to give you this type of unprecedented analysis. Remember, you can find these past shows as well as content from my friends John Rothstein, Gary Parrish, Matt Norlander. It's all living on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel. Until our next show, go visit us over on YouTube. We'll see you again real soon.